Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my program. I thank you again for just joining us on this very critical topic that is here today. I begin by thanking Dr. Christine Reyna, who brought the issue to me and said, Armando, we need to talk about this. This is too critical. This is too important. I said, Christine, can you bring me an expert, someone also, in addition to yourself, to help me talk about the topic, make it understandable, because there's so much media being overwhelmed on a daily basis about police brutality. There's so many things I think about, and I can't get my hand on it. And one of the persons that she recommended very highly was Jeremy Pagan. He's a PhD candidate in social psychology in Tufts University in Boston. Outstanding community. And we have him here today on the show. The three of us are going to dialogue, but mainly Jeremy is going to educate us, give us an insight. What's going on with all these issues about police brutality, and his own experience also being from Chicago and then now being in Boston, and also the research that Christine Reyna has done from a psychological point of view. So first, let me begin by welcoming all of you to being on the program. Jeremy, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me. This is a great honor. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And Christine Reyna, she is also in Chicago. Is it snowing out there, Dr. Reyna?
Almost.
Almost. Oh, I'm not leaving California. I don't care what happens out there. Well, let's begin with this topic. Jeremy's background. And Christine Reyna, you were with him. He was with you when he was at DePaul in Chicago. So tell us about his background.
Yeah, so Jeremy was an honor student and a McNair Scholar at DePaul University. And we were very interested, even at the time, in studying the community's reaction to excessive police and policing. We did some research looking at demonstrators in a police context and how nervous people get when they're around police, and how that could impact their behavior.
Jeremy, what made you so involved in this topic?
Yeah, so I grew up with family members in the police department in Chicago and in fellow suburbs. So it was always growing up, I learned about policing. And once I came into DePaul, I became very active in volunteering for nonprofits. And I just wanted to learn more, right? There was a disconnection between my community and policing, even though I seen Latinos in police uniform. Now I wanted to know, what are the subtle things that happen in everyday interactions that could create mistrust between those communities.
Did you ever have one of those experiences that you really just impacted you tremendously? Something happened and you sat there and just the world turned upside down?
Yeah, it happened. I was 18 years old. We were picking up my best friend from a bus stop. He was coming back from college, and it was three of us, three Latinos, 18 years old, about 9 p.m., and we're driving to my house. 2 blocks away from driving to my house, we get stopped by an undercover police officer. And literally in a matter of 5 minutes, there was 5 cop cars surrounding our car. I still remember it was one of the scariest times, because when the police officers came to our window, they already had the guns pointing at us. And so it wasn't a regular stop. It wasn't a regular cop. They were undercover. And so the guns were pointing at us. They made us get out of the car. They started searching the car without us knowing. And it was terrifying, right? And I guess for them, they thought that the car was stolen. And so they wanted to investigate it, and it was a pickup truck. So they wanted to see what was in the back of the car covered with the tarp. And so as 18 years old, you didn't know what to do with a gun pointing at you. And I think the weirdest experience too was the officers weren't white. There were 2 black officers, which just shows you that this policing issue isn't simply about color. while color is a big factor, it's about the culture of policing itself and how a police identity can bring terror to the communities that they serve.
Let me, you made a statement here, and I'm just sort of trying to backtrack. So they said they stopped you because they thought you were in a stolen truck. Wouldn't they have gone through the computer and find out if it's stolen or not?
I suppose they let us off after, I think it was 10 minutes. They searched us and then they made a report. Then they just let us go. And as I said before, I had police officers that are in the CPD, and I told them who my uncle was. And funny enough, that one of the officers that stopped us said that my uncle was his trainer while he was in the academy. And I don't know if that helped or not, but I think that right there made the officer more comfortable with me. It was still a weird experience, literally 2 blocks away from my house, that they just randomly searched us, and then 3 cop cars came right after.
That made an impression on you, and you sure?
I think at that moment, that's when I wanted to dig a little deeper, especially since the officers were Black. I knew that it wasn't just about race. There was a lot of things that maybe we just don't know. And I wanted to figure out what is that unknown.
So did you use the experience that you have family members in the police department as accessing them and asking them what they thought about the topic?
All the time. I just had this conversation last weekend with one of my uncles that used to train in the FBI as well. And so we have these conversations all the time. And in fact, when Christine and I were working on a project, we would actually reach out to police officers to review our materials. So whenever we ran an experiment, we had police officers review our surveys to make sure it was accurate before we collected any data.
Accurate. Boy, that's a big word nowadays. How accurate was it? Dr. Reyna, what were your experiences with this research you guys were doing mutually?
Yeah, so just to back up, I too have family in police, and I also have family that have had negative experiences with police. So I have, and friends, and I have the whole gamut. I think having family members or friends that are police officers and seeing the degree of distrust in the community towards police officers really makes you wonder what broke down and how is that happening and why does it continue? And I think that police and the way that policing happens in especially low-income communities of color plays such a huge role in ongoing disparities. So as somebody who's interested in racial disparities, like, you know, you have to understand the role that policing, having a criminal record, has on a person's economic prospects, has on a person's hope for the future. And I think that those things are all tied in.
Okay. There was a story a couple of years ago where there was a police department in the schools. If the kids were truant or, you know, had issues with the school, the police went in and got them, and the police wrote up a police report. And before the kid was even an adult, he already had a police record.
Yeah, they refer to this as the school to prison pipeline, where children who, you know, at a very fragile developmental age where they should be, you know, taught the rules, where they're going to make a lot of mistakes. Instead, their natural behaviors as kids, making mistakes, become criminalized. And not only do they enter adulthood with criminal records, but they enter adulthood with fear and about police.
Also the idea.
And this is, it's a really toxic cycle.
So this issue of
and really the services that children need in school. I was going to say the services that kids need in schools, like social workers and counselors and crisis managers, those services are getting cut as more and more investments are being made into policing, and we wind up where we are today.
Jeremy, what's your thoughts on this?
No, yeah, definitely. I was just reading that with everything with defunding police, exactly what Christine was saying, if we take police out of these schools, it could actually free up around $33 million. And so those $33 million could go back into more teachers, more social workers. And there's issues with policing in the schools. And part of this defunding police movement is that if Chicago removes police officers from its public schools, it could save up around $33 million. And so that $33 million could be reinvested into social workers at school, as well as more teachers. And so that could help solve these minor offenses or truancies instead of getting police involved and create violent situations.
Does anybody have information on how much money or how much of the police budget is going to buying all this equipment that they keep highlighting that, they look more like soldiers than they do like police? I mean, I think of police with hats. Okay, I can see a little bit of protection. These people look like robots. Are they spending money on this?
Yeah, that probably varies from precinct to precinct or department to department, but I do know that that some have partnerships with the military where a lot of decommissioned military equipment goes to police, sometimes for free, sometimes they're contracted. But it has really changed the tenor of policing and have made policing more frightening and more ominous. And I think that can create a really bad, that can really deteriorate the relationships with the community. They're supposed to protect the community. They're not, but they come across like they're attacking the community.
Exactly. I think building off of that now with that apparel, with how they're being looked at, it's more of the police against the community rather than the police are part of the community, because they're not looking like the community anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I see the pictures. I'm not saying, protecting, but different pictures, different places. And I see them standing there. So I'm looking more at a robot than I am looking at a police person. I can't see their faces. And if they have those shields against the sun and all that, I mean, I'm looking at 2050 in 2020. I'd be scared, and is this intentional?
Well, I know that when people in groups feel anonymous, or like when they wear masks or this type of equipment, being anonymous can make a person more likely to be deviant. And I think that we need to think about the implication of what happens when you put police in a uniform that implies a very different type of behavior. And does that have an impact on their psychology?
Jeremy?
I completely agree. I think just like as Christine said, the more we suit police officers with military gear, with more aggressive weapons, the more likely they are to use that in ways that maybe they didn't think they could, right? We see this a lot in psychology, where when you put a person in a powerful position, they're going to take advantage of all the roles and all the abilities that come with it.
I have another question, and I'd like to take this one further in another show because there's a lot to do this, but let me take it into a different direction. What is the background of these people to be police persons? Because once in a while I'm reading that some of the police people have a criminal record themselves. How is this? A, am I reading this right? And B, what impact does this have if it's real?
Yeah, so I can't really speak to having a criminal background, right? I think that may vary between certain departments, but I know in Chicago, they take that very serious. Of having that criminal background could make you ineligible. But I think getting to your point of what you really want to talk about is how can we up the requirements for the eligibility of police officers? So police often have to deal with domestic violence, homelessness, and mental health, but they're not trained for those things. So why not have police officers that get degrees in these specific fields, and so they're more prepared? I think that's what we really have to do.
So more of the training in dealing with social issues rather than dealing with policing issues, if you will.
Yeah, so having that expectation, right? So just as we're talking about defunding the police, this isn't necessarily saying that have police departments train officers for mental health issues and homelessness, but having officers be required to take classes on this in order to apply to be a police officer. So having that specific degree, either sociology, psychology, criminology, having that experience before they actually apply. So now you get officers that are officers because they want to, rather than officers because there's no other jobs that they could get.
And I would add to that to form partnerships with experts in social work and crisis intervention as part of their training. So much of the training of police officers happens in the field. And if you're not working with people who understand how to resolve these problems, then you're going to always default to the one training that you have, which is apprehending and, arresting criminals. So then everything becomes criminalized. And officers need to have that as part of their day-to-day training, so that becomes their default response to these non-criminal types of situations.
Dr. Reina, your background is in this area per se. Have you ever been asked to give these seminars to the police departments?
I've reached out to some police departments. It's tough. Police, I think they want reform, but it's very hard to get entry into police. They're very protective. Like they say, police don't like to be policed. And so you really have to build that relationship and that trust. And so far I have not been successful.
Run that one by me again. The police do not like to be policed. That's a new one for me. I'm all ears.
Yeah, and Jeremy, chime in because I'm sure you know all about this. Police they're very nervous about the spotlight being put upon them and their behaviors and their training and their technique. They tend to want to control the records of police, like misconduct allegations. They keep a lot of those records to themselves. The outcomes of investigations are often private and not made public. There really is this kind of culture of protection and at least from the public's point of view, it could feel like secrecy, but it really is kind of this culture of protecting your own and keeping things in-house.
Remind
Jeremy,
me again.
do you want to add to that?
Before we jump to Jeremy, let me ask the question to both of you. Remind me, so I'm having an issue here. Doesn't the public pay for the police department? Aren't they public servants? Jeremy, you have it.
Yeah, so the funny thing is that the public does pay for the police, but just as Christina was saying, the police themselves, especially in review boards. So one big thing that changed within the last 4 years in Chicago is that whenever police got indicted or did have misconduct, it was a police review board that reviewed these police officers, which you could see is very biased.
I would think so, yeah. If I check myself, I think I'm biased against me.
So in Chicago right now specifically, they created around 4 years ago the COPA, which is an external organization that reviews police misconduct and police policies. But still there's limitations to that because that is run by the mayor and run by the police superintendent. So right now in Chicago, there's reform to get a civilian police review board where community members around the city that are eligible can review these cases. And so now it won't be police policing each other, police reviewing police misconduct.
You said that was put in there 4 years ago. Has it been effective?
It's been effective compared to its prior format, right? So now
so it's not bad. So it was bad. Now it's less bad.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm asking that question.
So it's not as bad as before. They're heading into the right direction, but it's still police monitoring their own police misconduct. And the Department of Justice actually reviewed these circumstances and found that oftentimes police officers don't follow up on use of force cases. And so you have a lot of cases where people are being harmed by police, but there's no departmental consequences for that behavior.
So they don't have a criminal record because they can erase their own criminal record because they're writing the criminal records. Ah, I see a circle going here, dudes. I mean, I'm just really caught on this whole issue. But I guess what I'm understanding from you, Jeremy, is the idea that as long as these policies continue where the police can pretty much do what they want and there's no review on their actions, police brutality is, from their perspective, they're just doing their job. There's no per se, brutality. They're just banging people on the head.
Can I jump in on this? Because I think this is one of the things that makes this issue really complicated is that oftentimes, these review boards have to take in the police experience into account. And for police officers in the situation, they too are often in a heightened state of, they might be anxious or afraid. And from their point of view, things that look different from an outsider's point of view might feel like aggression or resisting arrest. And police are protected from things like that. Like they're allowed to react aggressively if they perceive aggression or the threat of aggression. And
I'm going to take issue.
This is why
I'm going to take issue.
No, I'm just saying, like, little
72-year-old, was he 72, 82-year-old guy standing there, and all this swarm of police come by and they push him. Come on. I mean, we just saw this picture the other day. Where did the police feel threatened?
Well, this is why, and I definitely want Jeremy to chime in here. This is why video recording and body cameras are so essential.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they get the situation outside of the mental state of the police officer. Jeremy, can you say a little bit about why body cameras are so important?
Yeah, definitely. And so some of the research I do, we find that when police officers wear body cameras, actually African Americans feel as safe as white people in some circumstances when they see a police officer with body cameras, to the extent that African Americans are more likely to report future crimes or feel more comfortable when they're around police by simply having that body camera. But I think we should be clear that body cameras aren't the whole solution, right? There's a lot of videotaped incidents of police use of force, yet police officers aren't going to jail as often, right? So there has to be more, right? What are we missing? I think that's the question.
Well, the citizens are also bringing in their body cameras.
Yeah.
A lot of times I've always thought if a policeman stopped me, and I just found this out 3 days ago, there was an article. It says you can tell Siri, I'm being pulled over, and your phone will automatically start recording from there. That's an Apple thing. But we all have our cameras.
Yeah.
We can all be broadcasting the incident live worldwide at any given time. So we're now dealing with a whole new view of the world because of this. So is the police department becoming more aggressive because people are becoming more documentary?
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions, and it goes back and forth, right? Are police becoming more hesitant with their use of force because everything's being recorded, or police just simply got used to the fact that their police departments are recording these incidents, but how often are they actually reviewing them? I think that's the big question, because if officers feel like these footages aren't getting reviewed as often, then having that camera is really not going to change their behavior.
And we know from high profile cases that oftentimes, even though police have body cameras, that footage isn't often made available to the public. And it's not until a civilian's recording is revealed that the police will then reveal their their body camera footage. And, you know, in some of these high profile cases where people were unarmed people were shot, we didn't see the body camera footage until it had already blown up into a movement and a protest.
Mhm.
Let me repeat something and I'm doing it for myself. Police departments are public agencies that pay by public funds for the public servant position. And I think that whole enterprise has been lost somewhere. I'm starting to see police as being an entity unto itself rather than being part of the, public welfare, public service. I don't know. It may be a personal thing, but that's my personal take on that. Unfortunately, we're getting close to the ending of the show. It's just, oh my God, I think we're barely getting started. But, we've covered a lot of ground, very important ground. And as we're getting to the closure, I'd like to start with you, Dr. Reina, your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, I think that we really need to start reimagining police. I think that there's been a step-by-step escalation in the militarization of police that have created a bigger and bigger gap between police and the community. And we need to rethink about it. We need to look at it with new eyes in order to, to bring us back together.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared for big change, but we've seen this reform of police before, right? It looks like suburbs, where we fund more towards social workers and healthcare than police. And then because of that, policing becomes part of the community and it's not a separate entity. So I think in order to build that trust in police, we need to get more people involved. So social workers, mental health institutions. In Chicago, there's been a lot of mental health institutions that's been closed down, right? And so then the police are being relied on to solve these issues. And so I think we gotta understand how much stress police are in and the mental health of police, right? How much police officers are actually going to therapy? How many of them are going to counseling? And so if they aren't, then their tolerance for violence is constantly increasing, right? And so I think we got to reassess how we monitor policing and how we monitor their stress, because when they're stressed, they can make dangerous decisions, and that's ultimately going to affect our livelihood.
We don't have time to run into the issue, but I'm speaking out loud. I remember reading the high level of divorce and suicide amongst people who are in the police department, and that was going up. And I think a lot of it, you just addressed it, that possibly because lack of resources, even for them, their resources are being cut back. They're being given more equipment instead of more mental health. Yeah. That's a new thought that came from you, Jeremy. So I want to thank you for that perspective as well. Well, I look forward to having both of you back on the show again and continuing the subject. But I'm having a real hard time summarizing this, but let's take another second for that. So what did we cover today? What did we learn today? What should we keep in mind, I think, is the better question of this. And let me go back to Dr. Reina on that question.
Yeah, I think that a really important question we need to ask is how to repair trust and build trust between police and the community. And it starts with accountability, either through recording, through citizen review boards, and training and community policing that enables police to engage more with the community, to build that trust, and to relieve some of their mental health stress, because they can actually have positive community interactions and not just negative ones. And I think all of these things intertwine and interrelate, and we really need to see it from that holistic perspective if we're going to see real change.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I think the two crucial things coming out of this conversation is that the public has to be more involved with policing, right? The public is paying for the policing, but there should be community policing, right? There should be community night watches. There should be representatives from each neighborhood with their police department, as well as reward systems. So police officers should be rewarded for solving different crimes by not simply arresting people, but by talking and sending them to different services. And I think we need to have those police officers feel confident that they're moving up in their ranks by not simply making arrests. And when we get that out there, I think there's going to build a lot of trust.
Wow, well, not only is it a timely topic because we're in 2020, but beyond that, it's also the future of the country and its infrastructure. If we're going to see 2050, we're going to have to learn how to change our systems. And I think, Jeremy, what stands out in my mind, you said major changes are required and people always fear change. That's just not even policing. But we have to change systems. We can't stay status quo. And I think what we're seeing is the fact that the status quo isn't working. It's breaking down even faster in front of us. I want to thank you both. Again, I want to thank Dr. Christy Reyna, who's from DePaul University, for being my co-host. I couldn't have done it without her. Her insights and her helping me to prepare for this complex issue is really, really outstanding. Jeremy, Jeremy Pagan. You're at Tufts University in Boston. You're going to be a PhD candidate real soon. I feel you're going to get your PhD and do many fantastic, wonderful things as well. So I wish you continuous success. And with that, I'd like to close the show and thank both of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Armando F. Sanchez. You can contact me at afsanchez66@gmail.com. If you have any questions about the show, but again, we thank both of you for doing your work in this very area of so much importance to keep the community safe. And thank you for your ongoing efforts. And Dr. Reyna, I hope you have more involvement in doing presentations to the police department and the general public, because we don't know also. And Jeremy, take care of that PhD and let's get you back on the show.
Thank you so much, Armando. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, again, contact me if you have any questions about the program, but it's these two people that are in front of us today on this show that make it hopeful for the future. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.